Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books. Today we're talking about Panic Mode. David Zaslav, Gunnar Wiedenfeld's, the Warner Brothers Discovery team have really upset social justice warriors. They've really gotten people to the point where they just don't know what to say or do next. They're starting to ask questions like, well, maybe they just want to sell off the DC properties because they keep having so many problems with the DC properties. Basically overblowing the cancellation of Batgirl and, Ezra Miller is a problem and they don't know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And what they're doing is cleaning out all of the social justice representation influence that takes away from just telling good stories, making good content, and making really, really profitable content. All right, we're going to get into this article from Game Rant. Before we do, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up when you like it. It's a huge help. You guys are really helping to build the channel. It's great. I really appreciate you. Okay, does Warner Brothers even want to keep its DC properties? With one disaster after another, many beloved characters' futures hanging in the balance, what is Warner Brothers even doing? You talk about beloved characters hanging in the balance. Who are these people that they're talking about? These are the people they call toxic fans. Because everyone who loves these characters, they don't love them because they are useful as representation examples for the next social movement. They love them because of the history, the canon, the expectation that when you do Thor is going to look like Thor. You know, here's an article from Wall Street Journal. Marvel Studios' box office slump shows limits of Disney's superhero universe. Thor: Love and Thunder had weak box office sales in its second week, fitting a pattern for a prized franchise showing signs of age. Signs of age for a prized franchise? Maybe it's because you took Thor and made her a woman? Or him a woman? I'm not sure what to even say about that. No, this is not signs of age. This is signs of stop messing with the content. Okay? You can't say the results of Thor are because the property is getting to be a little bit too oversaturated. Like, no, the reason why movies do well in the second week is because people were talking about it from the first week. And this is what they were talking about instead. I mean, she's fine, but not for Thor. Warner Brothers has exclusive film rights to many of the most iconic characters in the history of fiction, and their usage of those characters has been a disaster. Things have gone so far off the rails that fans have begun to wonder whether the studio is preparing to abandon one of its biggest cash cows. No. The DC Comics universe used to dominate the big screen, while Marvel's efforts struggled to be anything other than cheap messes. This is going back 30 years or something. Over the years, Marvel has become a success factory with a reliable model, and DC's begun to either run out of steam or cease to try. Now, as far as that success strategy goes, I mean, this is the Wall Street Journal. You know, they're all about money. No, the Marvel films haven't been doing as well as they should. And the only Marvel film that recently did do very well wasn't from Disney. It was Spider-Man. So what was special about Spider-Man? Well, it is Spider-Man, but beyond that, Spider-Man looked like Spider-Man. And it was a Spider-Man story. It wasn't this. It wasn't what the director called the gayest movie of all time or the gayest superhero movie ever. That's not what people are looking for unless that's like part of what the brand of the character is. I mean, apparently it's not what they're looking for. So no, they haven't actually all been great successes. Now, Warner Brothers seems to be following an extremely grim and cynical corporate strategy. Cynical, you say? Anything that doesn't have the potential to be a monster hit seems prepped to be scuttled as the studio desperately seeks a big hit. I mean, all movie studios are looking for a big hit. I don't think there's much desperation from them. They just seem to be focused on, well, what do we need to do to make sure something's successful? Let's just do that. Batgirl may have been canceled due to poor test screenings. It may have. But all new studio head David Zaslav can talk about is his desire to make big tent-pole blockbusters. Well, I mean, earlier in the article, they just cited how successful Marvel is as a success factory. Why would they not want to replicate a success factory? Obviously, Marvel and DC have been copying each other for years, ever since the comics, decades, ever since the comics. Warner Brothers supposedly wields a 10-year plan comparable to Marvel's comically long schedules. I don't know why that's so funny. The company seems to intend to continue pushing forward its DCEU cinematic experiment, but there have been substantial bumps in the road. As HBO Max slowly loses its hold on DC material. You know why I just almost said Wonder Woman? I'll tell you. Because I just watched the Snyder Cut the other night again. And their treatment of Wonder Woman in the Snyder Cut, for me, was exactly the way you do a female property. You want a character to be cool. She has her own music when she goes and starts kicking people's butts. She was confident. Obviously, Gal Gadot's beautiful. That's exactly the way you'd handle a property like this. You don't need to go and say, well, we're going to have this person there of this specific gender and that historical background, and they look like this, and that's the person that's more important than who you're going to have be actually the story, the character. You know, it's more important to just look a certain way. So Wonder Woman was great. It really just popped into my mind as like, if they just made Zack Snyder's Wonder Woman in a series of films and just kept doing just that, no political messaging, just that, they'd do $1 billion every film. And I would expect they're going to do stuff like that. You let me know what you think in the comments below. These guys are about money and about brand. I mean, how many videos have I done on these guys? 33. This will be the 34th of what the management team's doing at Warner Brothers Discovery in great detail. And they're getting rid of anything and everything that stands in their way from just producing good, profitable content. The company seems intent to continue pushing forward its DCEU cinematic experiment. Yeah, it's what experiment? There's no big experiment. They're just basically planning to make good movies. They like how The Flash is going. They didn't like how Aquaman 2 was going, so it's being reworked, Aquaman 2. Not a big deal. The DC Extended Universe began in 2013 with Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. For its first few years, Snyder's singular creative vision was the dominant design of the franchise. Even when he didn't direct the films, they fit into a puzzle in which he was the chief architect. Which seemed to be working, right? I mean, they made money. Nobody was really upset with the films. Batman, Superman, a little slow and a bit much, but it was a big epic. Why not? Made money. This was an immensely troublesome decision that has in many ways only proven to be a massive wound in the company. Snyder's fan base is one of the most diehard, rabid, and hateful, toxic fans, right, towards outsiders. During his reign, his fans were happy, but a tremendous percentage of the audience despised his miserable, hyper-masculine take on the characters. What? Okay. Masculine. Okay. Could you have a less masculine take on a character? Let's just make the character a woman. I published spoof comics 30 years ago. I'll have to show you some images sometime. And actually, Adam Hughes did a lot of the covers. Gorgeous work. We did female versions of male characters. They were not male looking. It was an absurdity. It was a comedy. It was a parody. And they did very well. But it was supposed to be a comedy, not this. When Snyder left Justice League and the studio put out the malformed mess that hit theaters in 2017, fans began demanding a fully restored Snyder Cut. They got the Snyder Cut, and they're still demanding the director reclaim his position. Warner Brothers will be dealing with one portion of the audience viciously deriding and review bombing their material forever. Well, I don't think so, right? I mean, because as long as they put out content that's not Batgirl, and it's not Thor, where Thor is a woman, it seems like they probably do just fine. One of the biggest problems with Warner Brothers as a studio is its inability to move on. Warner Brothers had inarguable guaranteed yearly monster success a decade ago, and they've never stopped trying to recapture it. Well, why should they stop trying to recapture it? Money is good when you're making stuff. When Warner Brothers had the Harry Potter franchise, It had a reliable hit maker that it could simply let rack up billions year after year. That Warner Brothers seems to want out of its DCE. That's what they want out of DCEU. Well, why wouldn't they? It's the same level of unquestioned monster success. You know, it's interesting. They just keep trying to make the case of why can't you just put out a bad Batgirl movie that really won't do well, that won't have international audiences, that won't draw more people to your direct-to-consumer platforms. But why don't you just put it out anyway? Because, you know, she's Latina. That's not a good argument. Though every DCEU makes a comical amount of profit, it still isn't enough for them. Comical as in a lot. Movies cost a lot to make, and having to take even the slightest risk on a project that might not bring in $1 billion isn't worth it. Well, there are plenty of projects they do that are not $1 billion. Remember Joker? That was like a $50 million budget. It just coincidentally happened to bring in $1 billion. So when you have a franchise like Batman and the Batman universe of characters and properties, how could you make any excuse for like, well, we're just going to throw out Batgirl and, you know, the Warner Brothers woke people will like it. The people that liked the WB network will like it. It's not enough. You're messing with a money machine. You're messing with something that could impact Joker 2, in addition to Batman, in addition to all the other DC titles. There's no way that's going to happen. They know the value of the brands. They're very big on brands, the Zaslav people. They're not fooling with it. It's just an incredible argument to just say like, well, you know, why don't they take a little risk? It's like, no, business is about mitigating risks and delivering for your customers and delivering to the larger community of help you getting the job done. Business is not about let's just take a bunch of risks. The whole purpose is to mitigate and reduce risks. And when you have no risk, you have essentially a monopoly, and then you make a lot of money. This problem isn't exclusive to Warner Brothers. It's become common. Movie studios want to make fewer movies and see more success. $1 billion hit covers a dozen mild successes or flops. This strategy is poisonous, but it's clearly popular. Well, I mean, for the author of this article, like, yeah, that's why you need the hits, because the hits cover the cost of everything else. The other reason you need the hits is because, as they've mentioned in the last conference call, Warner Bros. Discovery is very focused on selling their content many, many times in many, many places to many, many people. They will do direct-to-consumer. They'll do movie theaters. They'll do paid TV like HBO. But they'll do international free-to-air. You know, it goes on and on and on and on and on. And the thing is, if you make a half-ass project like what Batgirl unfortunately seems to have been, it's not going to get through all the distribution channels. So there's no point. So you spend $90 million or $112 million by the time you're done editing it and throwing it together. Then you haven't even promoted the damn thing yet. And you know it's not going to do well, and it's going to damage the potential of other brands because people are going to be disappointed when they go see it. No, they're not doing that. That's why it always pays. Do your best. You know, sell your stuff. If you're making stuff, you make comics, I make comics. We sell them as many places as we can because that's how you make a profit. It's just that way. Warner Brothers still has a few central DCEU tentpoles that it seems poised to continue using. Aquaman, Shazam, and Wonder Woman are likely to keep getting solo films. Wonder Woman should be coming out every other year. The Zack Snyder-styled Wonder Woman 1 was also fine. No reason you can't do that movie on a regular basis, and you just can't let these directors do whatever the hell they want. You've got to. It's why they need a head of DC Films or a small group of people that are head of DC Films and TV, so they can keep a common aesthetic, not let any politics nonsense get in there, and just keep the things coming out. Blue Beetle is set to be introduced next year, despite the star's many public crimes, or maybe alleged crimes. I don't know if they've all been adjudicated. The Flash is still coming out. Like I say with Ezra Miller, as long as he doesn't kill anybody. And he was good in at least the Snyder Cut. That's the one that I was checking out. He was just fine. So why not? Just as long as he doesn't kill anybody. I hope he gets help. All of these established characters can continue to lead huge blockbusters to immense financial rewards, But the instant one of them fails to deliver the massive return they're expected to bring in, Warner Brothers will likely toss them aside, culling the stable yet again. Yeah, they will. They're extremely big on accountability. So they want to know who's making money for them, and they want to know who's costing them money. And it's really that simple. It's also called merit. It's a meritorious system. And that is the American way. What works, works. Everybody deserves a chance. You got to prove yourself, and then you keep going. But if it fails, of course it's going to be destroyed. It's going. Despite Zaslav's talk of 10-year plans, the entire operation seems very reactionary. Arguably, literally as I make this video, it's September now. They acquired and merged with Warner Media just 5 months ago. It was 5 months ago. So there's a limit to what they can accomplish in 5 months. There really is. So particularly if they don't have anybody to head up the DC Films unit yet. What the hell are they going to do in terms of strategy except to say, hey, we should copy what Marvel did in the early years because it worked. Well, it did. So why don't you? Well, we are. Just have to find someone. Makes sense. Arguably, the studio is betting on a ton of clout on the same character they've always had success with, Batman. Matt Reeves has a long contract with Warner Brothers, but the list of viable options is growing shorter. Warner Brothers' DCEU might be running out of material. I mean, you just mentioned Aquaman's fine, Momoa's fine, just you can't let him put out a bad movie. Ezra Miller is a little bit nuts, but again, he hasn't killed anyone, so he can continue to make movies. You've got Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. She's a moneymaker, and Marvel has nothing like that. Black Widow doesn't hold the smallest candle to Wonder Woman the way they're executing at Marvel, and it's only going to get worse at Marvel. So they seem to have a lot of material to me. You can let me know what you think in the comments below. Warner Brothers isn't abandoning the DCEU just yet, but it still feels as if it could be an option. It's not an option. If you listen to the conference call where they were just talking about in the second quarter what their results were. When they were talking about brands, the first thing Zaslav mentioned was Batman and then Superman and Wonder Woman. He's very well aware of the crown jewels of Warner Media. They're not getting rid of it. It's senseless, crazy panic talk. There's no way they're getting rid of it. And as I did a video just the other day, there's no way they're going to license out DC Comics. Even though it's not going to be a moneymaker, even if it was a small moneymaker, it doesn't matter to them. They need control of what's going on with their intellectual properties because they know that this multi-billion-dollar business with these very unique properties they control are a 1 in a million opportunity. You just can't replicate this. As Marvel continues to do more of this kind of stuff with their characters, just ruin their characters and literally emasculate the characters to the point that they're now women. And, just nothing wrong with women. Just like when you turn a male superhero into a woman, they're not a man anymore. It's very possible that the Batman property, Superman, what DC has is going to be the real superheroes. That's all that's going to be left. And Marvel is creating such bad will with what they're doing. They're disappointing so many people. They're not bringing in new people the way they thought they would just by screwing around with the characters. It's not working. So, of course, we'll see what happens. As projects get canceled with wild abandon, closer to release than one could imagine a decade ago, anything seems possible. No, not anything. All they're doing is they're saying, hey, wait a minute. We just want this stuff to be good. We want people who love the brands and who are super fans to be completely satisfied. And the social justice warriors call those people toxic fans, and the Zaslav people call them super fans. And the super fans term, it's interesting watching some more background on the Zaslav people. Zaslav says in interviews, he's talking about golf, he's talking about cooking, he's talking about their food channels from Discovery. Years before, 5 years, 10 years before, in interviews on YouTube, he's talking about how they're focused on the super fans for each of the brands. So they understand what the concept of superfans are. They do not feel like the term toxic fans exists. There's no toxic fans in their business. With its nightmarish fan base, see, toxic fans, nightmarish fan base. All the fans want is a good version of Batman, something that is consistent with what their expectations are. You know, it's like going into a restaurant, they serve you bad food, and it's like, oh my God, why would you complain? It's like, well, the food isn't even cooked. It's like, well, you're just a toxic customer at the restaurant. No. Cynical corporate strategy. They're only in it for the money. Like, well, okay. And desperate hunt for a quick profit, Warner Brothers could easily destroy its own biggest franchise. You know, do you know what a franchise is? Like, you've heard the term franchise. McDonald's is a franchise. A franchise is a system and a process for delivering a product or a service. Franchise has been adopted also by intellectual property, because you have something like Pokemon, you have something like Batman, you have something like Spider-Man. Those are franchises also. Those are things that they have certain specific qualities to them, and people are willing to, again and again and again and again, routinely spend money consuming a version of that franchise's product or service. So they'll see more Spider-Man movies. But if you dilute the quality of the franchise, you know, if McDonald's, now their food is not super healthy food. It's damn consistent, though. It's the same all over the world. People know what they're getting. It's fast food. If instead of delivering reasonably good fast food in a consistent way, McDonald's didn't do that, they would ruin their franchise. And DC is not going to do that. The Zaslav people are not going to do that. They are not in a desperate hunt for a quick profit. They're in a long-term strategic plan to develop tons and tons of more profit. Warner Brothers could easily destroy its own biggest franchise. No, they will not. Fans have to wait to see whether the company's logos pop up before the next Superman movie in a decade or so. I don't think it's going to be 10 years for another Superman movie, but you can tell me what you think of that in the comments below. Batgirl and the Flash, the bad optics of Warner Brothers' DC strategy. So it's interesting to see what their take is on the strategy for Warner Brothers and DC. This is what Gunnar Wiedenfeld says their strategy is for HBO Max and Discovery Plus. This is from a conference he was at, Goldman Sachs, a big investment firm, pitching the company. Basically, these are the guys who make decisions about investing in their stock. HBO Max brings extreme buzz, while Discovery Plus has low churn rates. So HBO Max is supposed to come out with projects that people get excited about, like what they're doing with House of the Dragon, like their film projects that they're taking from their library, HBO's hit shows. That's supposed to get people talking and really excited about the brand and everything they're putting out through HBO Max. Discovery Plus has low churn rates, meaning people tend to stay on Discovery Plus because it's some affinity group like golf, cooking, Food Channel, fix-it-up shows and things like that. But those are not shows that usually people talk about with their friends. So they've got, two sides of a great coin if they can put those things together. That's basically their strategy, is they've got the best of both worlds if they put it together right and they continue with building things that work. But that also means they can't take the risk of a Batgirl where people aren't going to say good things about it. They're just not. Except the representation people will say, see, we told you you could do this. It's like, well, it's not going to get people to sign up for the service. That's all these guys care about, is honoring the brands and then leveraging the brands to get signups for their service. They just want to make money, pay the debt off, the $50 billion in debt, and pay their investors a profit. And, one good thing about the financial results of the company so far, they have paid down $6 billion of acquisition-related debt so far as of August. So, they just merged in April. They had $6 billion they could pay off, knocking it down from 58 to around 50-ish billion dollars. It seems like the DC camp is going through a constant PR disaster, and the Batgirl cancellation hardly does Warner any favors. It saved their ass, saved their franchise. Beyond the economic impact of reshuffling the DCEU is going to have for the newly found Warner Bros. Discovery, the recent decisions made by the company that affect their DC brands could be the first building for Marvel-like levels of success, or simply just another catastrophe. However, judging from the outright brashness, how could they be so brash, in the cancellation of their own project, Batgirl and Supergirl, the conglomerate's DC brand starts to look more and more like a hostile place for people that worked on these films. Yeah, I mean, it's hostile if you worked on a bad film. That's a bad feeling when your project's not going to come out. But you have to kind of be understanding about the people that are doing this as a business and how it affects beyond your paycheck. You got your paycheck. It affects the whole brand, the whole company. Meanwhile, on the opposite end, Warner still has an ongoing PR nightmare thanks to Ezra Miller's erratic behavior over the last 2 years, which also shows the studio lacking that same decisiveness when making other hard calls. What is exactly going on in the DC universe, and why are things the way they are now? Well, the article goes on, of course, to explain all of that, why DC's Marvel plan is the anti-Marvel way. The MCU might get some shade thrown at it by the way that the Marvel movies have become too formulaic, how scripts fail to seize on the individuality of most superheroes, or the apparent lack of a real plan throughout all of Phase 4. None of us like what's going on with the Marvel movies, I don't think. Yet, for all of its faults, Marvel Studios was making some high-risk bets when Iron Man came out in 2008. That was a bet the company kind of moved, but they needed to demonstrate that they could produce their own films. That was pre-Disney. Thor: Love and Thunder is far from the studio's best movie. It is not. Yet comparing the reception of this film as well as the MCU's worst revenue earners reveals that executives were willing to accept less than stellar earnings. They knew that it would all pay off big time when the big Avengers crossover manifested itself in movie theaters. I mean, Iron Man on its own was a really substantial, successful movie. Thor was successful. Phase 1 worked for them because each of the movies were individually pretty good and they were definitely on brand. If something is on brand and it's good, it's going to make money, especially if it has an interlocking continuity and the story continues from movie to movie. It's all that kind of entertainment has always worked. It's soap opera entertainment. It's always worked in comics when they had continuity years ago. It's always been successful. It's going to continue to be successful. It's a human thing. Perhaps it's because DC has always been playing catch up with Marvel. Nevertheless, Warner Brothers executives were never as patient with underwhelming film productions as their rivals. Batman's Ben Affleck and the Justice League fiasco are prime examples of that. These precedents say a lot about the studio's fickle, trigger-happy nature when it comes to cancellations, a trend that's now been ratified. A trend has been ratified by new CEO David Zaslav's killing Batgirl and Supergirl. How could he do such a thing? The main argument coming from new management is essentially that it makes very little sense to spend tons of money on streaming-quality movies, and that moving forward, Warner Brothers will only support films that can be released into movie theaters. This strategy makes a lot of sense considering how Top Gun Maverick's long waiting time paid off. That is until one remembers that Warner Brothers itself spent a whole year pushing first-day streaming drops on HBO Max. Well, yeah, but the reason they're not going to continue with this is because that didn't work for them. Movie theaters weren't open at the time. It's like, well, we're either not going to put the movie out or we are going to put the movie out. They waited on Maverick. I mean, that was a big decision that involved Tom Cruise specifically. He's a major, major private participant in Maverick. So, but no, they can't necessarily just delay all of their projects because of the pandemic, especially when they're trying to develop subscribers for HBO Max. Also, they tried. It either worked or it didn't work. Didn't work, they're not still doing it. They particularly are not doing it. They're not doing it now. They're not going to have a one day and date, release where they collapse all the windows for when they release different versions. They're not doing that. This may have helped the platform grow, but at the cost of irreparably damaging its relationship with none other than Christopher Nolan, arguably its most recognized director. The falling out with Nolan becomes relevant once more due to the huge loss it means for the people behind Batgirl to see their years' worth of effort shelved forever, as well as all the controversies regarding Zack Snyder's departure. Even if it's not the intended messaging, Warner Brothers no longer seems to care for creative endeavors. Yeah, I'm sure it's not their intended messaging that they don't care about creative projects. There's little room for experimentation if the studio is not willing to eat its own share of Incredible Hulks or bad Thor movies. Well, they would not produce this. They would not produce a Thor movie like that because it's not on brand. If the superfans aren't going to love the project, they're not doing the project. That's the same discipline and discovery for the Golf Channel. Why would they not do that with Batman and Superman? The Flash and the elephant in the room. One does not simply promote a film starring an actor that could be facing potential jail time amidst the controversies involving Ezra Miller. And for all the talk of a new 10-year plan for the DCEU, Warner has said very little about the film beyond the promise that it's going to be good. And I'm sure it will be. The latest buzz surrounding Miller is that the actor filmed some scenes for The Flash even after all the allegations against him surface, which hardly helps from a reputational standpoint at the moment. At a time when companies are adopting ESG practices at a faster rate, although there's a lot of pushback on that because it's incredibly destructive, Warner has taken its time to put out any statements regarding what they'll do with Miller. So they haven't put out statements what they're going to do with Miller, except obviously they seem to be behind him. It's true that it's now probably not the time to cast a new Flash, since they could even spoil the plot for a massive blockbuster. But at some point, fans will learn whether the timing for it was down to creative or business reasons. To make matters worse, Affleck's return as Batman continues to prolong the actor's tenure over the Caped Crusader, as does the constant wave of rumors regarding Michael Keaton cameos being spread out speaks to a lack of planning without it being clear when the new DCEU will take form. Yeah, Warner Brothers Discovery top brass may believe they have found a new blueprint for success, but fans should be cautious to fall for DC's promises as the new plans look a lot like past failures. What the best DC movies have going for them is that they're wildly different from their Marvel counterparts, and less experimentation could translate to less personality that deprives the audience of lower budget masterpieces like The Joker. I mean, again, just trying to make every argument they can to say, please, we killed Marvel. Don't take Marvel's place as a good superhero universe with actual heroes where you're not experimenting on the genders of beloved characters and you're just actually delivering for the fans. Please don't do that. Sorry, he's going to keep waving. He's going to keep laughing. They're going to produce on-brand superhero content, and fans are going to love it because that's what they're working backwards from. They're not trying to undercut, introduce, get experimental. And, under their strategy, they may never have produced Joker. They may have said, no, we're not doing a Joker film. And they split the profits on that deal anyway. They made money, but they lost a lot of opportunity doing that. But they may not do a movie like Joker, an experimental film. Well, if experimental films mean that you're not going to have female versions of your male characters, that's probably a good thing. Let me know what you guys think of that in the comments below. Keep it on brand, right? Be sure you're subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up when you like it. And I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.